I'm Jane Applegath. This is the Epic Vision Zone, where bold ideas meet extraordinary leaders, and today, where curiosity has the power to rewrite history. What if the story of Amelia Earhart isn't finished yet? And what if the search for answers reveals more about human obsession than the disappearance itself? Rachel Hartigan is an award winning journalist and former writer, reporter, and editor at National Geographic. For more than a decade, she has covered everything from the genetics of persimmon trees to the long road to women's suffrage. Her work has appeared in the Washington Post's Book World, where she served as an editor, and in U.S. News and World Report. Rachel has twice voyaged to a remote Pacific island known as Ground Zero for one of the most compelling theories surrounding Amelia Earhart's disappearance. Her riveting book, Lost: Amelia Earhart's Three Mysterious Deaths and One Extraordinary Life, reveals not just why we remember Amelia Earhart as a trailblazer, but why unsolved mysteries keep us searching for answers. Her reporting on National Geographic funded expeditions has drawn more than 1 million readers into the mystery, revealing new evidence as Hartigan and her team descend into a world of conspiracy and obsession. Through its irresistible characters and remarkable research, Lost unveils three leading theories behind Earhart's fate, taking readers on a journey of discovery and intrigue. Welcome, Rachel. Thank you for joining us here today.
Thanks so much for having me, Jane.
Well, I am so intrigued about this topic. And Rachel and I were talking just briefly before we got on here, and it is an amazing story. And Rachel was saying that this was something that came to her. So, as we said, there are no coincidences. So, let's delve into the journey. What inspired you to really dig into the mystery of Amelia Earhart's disappearance?
Well, as I told you earlier, I didn't know much about Amelia Earhart. I mean, we all learn about her in elementary school, and whenever somebody wants to point out a brave woman, they point to Amelia Earhart. But beyond that, I didn't know that much. But I was working at National Geographic, and one day, one of my editors stopped me in the hall and said, "We have a berth on a ship that's going to an uninhabited island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean where some people think Amelia Earhart crashed and died. Do you want to go?" And I said, yes. But then I was like, well, wait a second, where are we going exactly? And what, what is this about? So that was my introduction to this world of people who have spent a lot of time trying to figure out what happened after Amelia Earhart disappeared on her round the world flight in 1937. And so I wrote a
Mm.
lot of news stories about it, but news stories are, kind of by definition short and to the point. And there felt like there was so much more to say. And there are often, these stories bubble up. So and so is says they found something that looks like a plane in the Pacific Ocean or in a lagoon on this island. And I thought, readers must really wonder, who are these people that keep looking and why do they keep looking? And so I wanted to, write a book that really explored not just her life, but also the lives of these other people.
Mm. Fascinating. You're a lot like me in the sense that if somebody had approached me with that, I would be on board immediately and then be, oh, wait a minute. What? Where am
Right.
I going? and
Right.
and it's like, okay, it sounded fun in that nanosecond, but now the reality is, okay, I'm going to be on a ship for how long and where? But
Yeah.
how long were you on the ship or the yacht? What, I mean, it must have been a big vessel.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a funny expedition in that the first one was half expedition with archaeologists, dog handlers, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Um, uh, Me, the journalist, there were some videographers, and then the rest of the people were people who had bought into it as a vacation. They were just sort of adventure explorers. So we were on a cruise
Oh,
ship out of Fiji, and it took us 5 days to sail from Fiji to this island called Nikumaroro, and we were there about a week, and then it was about 5 or so days back. So we were on the ship for quite a while, and I learned that I get seasick, which was not something I particularly wanted to learn. So it was part of the fun.
yes. Oh my Lord. Yeah, I'm with you. I do. I don't like boats or ships because I do get seasick. So I feel
Yeah,
for you, Rachel. I really feel for you.
yeah.
And you're like, I want to
Thank
get
you.
off, but I can't. Well,
Oh, there was nowhere to
thank
go.
yeah, exactly. You can't. You're just on in the middle of the ocean. Well, thank you for sharing
Mm.
that because I was just really curious. And your book depicts Earnhardt's disappearance as three possible stories. And I didn't know any of this. So I was as intrigued as any reader just even doing the information for this interview. So, three possible stories: a crash and sink, castaway, and a capture. So, which one has the most compelling evidence that you found, and why have these three persisted over the years?
That is such an interesting question because people argue about what is evidence and who
Mm,
actually has it. Um, in terms of evidence, there's nothing solid. Nobody's found anything connected with Earhart or or her navigator, Fred Noonan. Nobody's found any part of the plane. Um, the evidence that we do have is can be interpreted, well, this is arguable too, but can be interpreted in different ways. There was a ship waiting for her at Howland Island, which was the island that she was aiming for. She was almost done with her round the world flight, had taken off from Lae, New Guinea, and was aiming for Howland Island. There was a Coast Guard ship waiting for her, and the radio operators on that ship took logs of their messages with her. So that's one piece of evidence. And the piece of the evidence there is what she said and how close she sounded when she said it.
mm,
So the operator said it sounded like she got close enough, so close, in fact, that one of the operators ran up on deck to see if she was coming in. So they thought she was very close. In her last message, she said she was flying north and south on a line of position, um, basically a navigational line that went through Howland Island and then north where there wasn't much in the ocean, and then south where she hit the Phoenix Islands. And the island I went to is called Nikumaroro, and some people say that shows that she was flying south and she ended up in Nikumaroro. So that's evidence for the castaway theory. And then there's all sorts of eyewitness accounts in Saipan and the Marshall Islands saying that she was captured by the Japanese, people saying that they saw her. Unfortunately, those eyewitness accounts don't, they contradict each other.
mm.
They say they saw her at different points, at different times, and that she died in different ways. So, I mean, there's other evidence that can be cited. The folks who researched the Nikumaroro theory, the castaway theory, have found evidence of a burn site, which means like a campfire, where there's lots of 1930s era artifacts like a zipper pull, a cosmetics case, not a case, but like a case for blush.
Hmm.
Um, and clams that have been opened in a very non um, islander way. So they point to that as evidence that someone was there, but there's nothing there to tie it to Amelia Earhart. So, all of which is to say, there's lots of things that people interpret as evidence for their theories, but there's nothing that definitively says she crashed in the ocean, or she crashed on an island, or she was captured by the Japanese.
Hmm. Interesting. The one that really sparks my interest is the first where you said that, they got the radio message and it sounded like she was so close that they actually went out, someone went out on deck to see if they could see
Yeah.
the plane. And it's like, well, she must have been, because back in those days, I don't think, well, they didn't have the technology for the transmission as much as we do today. So, wow, that is fascinating. Yeah. And I did read a little bit, like you said, that they did find some a zipper and a cosmetic thing and something that would
Mm.
indicate that she might have landed on the island. Well, that those are fascinating. Yeah, I had not heard the third one is a little bit out there. I mean, only because they're eyewitness and nothing conclusive of that. But well,
Hmm.
thank you for that insight because this just leads to the intrigue even more. So, nearly a century later, then, the Earnhardt mystery still grips at public imagination, as you've seen, and certainly through your book as well, and how well it's doing. So, and the fact that National Geographic, wanted to do some digging. So, what
Hmm.
psychological and cultural forces keep people obsessed with this story, do you think?
Well, I think psychologically, with Earhart, she was so famous when she
Mm,
disappeared that it was sort of unbelievable that somebody that everyone would recognize, everybody knew the sound of her voice, would just be gone. I think that was hard for people to understand then, and in a way now, because she still pops up in our culture. She pops up in ads. I mean, we all know what she looks like. So I think that's one aspect of it. And another part of it is that we just really like stories with endings. We don't like open
mhm.
ended stories where we don't know, it's ambivalent. But then there was just a lot of cultural and historical forces that also kept her alive, in a sense, in our eyes. The Japanese theory, I think, is the most indicative of that because at the time she disappeared, Japan had what were called the South Seas mandated. So they had control of most of the islands in the Pacific. I think it was like 10,000 islands, some of which were very small, but, and they didn't let a lot of foreigners in. So, governments were concerned about what was going on and they were being aggressive towards China.
Right.
So people just, whatever was happening in Japan was kind of mysterious to outsiders. Then, of course, there's Pearl Harbor and World War II and all the Pacific forces from the US kind of sailing further west and west from island to island to island. All these soldiers are all of a sudden in places that they'd never been before. And they think about Earhart. They kind of have a vague sense that this is where she disappeared. And some of them say, well, I found something that belonged to her. I found a picture of her, or I found a
Mm,
suitcase with women's clothing, or I found, one man said that he found a book that said Amelia Earhart's 10-year diary, which she probably would not have brought on her flight. But it started, her story started to intersect with, big historic forces. And then it kind of died down a little bit after the war, but it resurfaced again in 1960, right after Gary Powers had been shot down over the Soviet Union. He was flying a plane and spying on the Soviet Union, but the US government said, oh no, it's a weather plane. So people were
mhm.
kind of primed for the idea that the US government set pilots out to spy. And that was one of the theories of what happened to her in Japan. She'd gone up to spy on Japan and been shot down. So there's all these interesting intersections that where people have questions about something that's going on that's contemporary to them, and they see as a way to explain what's going on now what happened to Amelia Earhart in the past.
Mm. Yes, it's very interesting. It's like an energy that is out there, and it pops
Hmm.
up every now and then. And it reminded me in today's current world where we have the unfortunate mystery of the missing mother um,
Yeah,
in the news, and
yeah.
reminded me of that when I was preparing this morning, because I was thinking, you're right. We as humans like an ending, and whether that be good or bad, it's just a conclusion that it's the
Hmm.
unknown that just kind of eats away at us, and the mystery
Yeah.
of what could have happened. So yeah, I could see that absolutely. Well, I have here the myth versus the woman. You have Amelia Earhart. She's often cast as a flawless feminist icon or a reckless risk taker, which I've heard. Tell us why your research challenges these simplified narratives and reveals the more complex woman behind the legend.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I really enjoyed in doing this research is realizing that she was a person. And
Mm,
one of the things that surprised me is that when she first became famous, she was actually 30. Maybe she was 31. But she was not actually so young.
mhm,
She had It took her a while to find her path. And when we think about icons, we almost think they were just born that way. They're instantly on that path and there's no deviation from the path. But that's not really what her path was like. There was a lot of meandering. She learned how to fly, but then couldn't afford to keep it up. She was in Los Angeles when she learned to fly, but then had to move to Boston, where she took all sorts of jobs and ended up being a social worker, which she really liked. But that's when she got the offer to fly across the Atlantic. So her path, I mean, hardly anybody's path in life is straight, but hers definitely wasn't. There was a lot of
mm,
meandering, and so I think that kind of undercuts the idea that she's some type of superwoman. She was a very brave woman. She was really interested in the future, and new technology and all those kinds of things. She was daring. Um,
mm,
and she was also very lucky. I mean, I know people have said that she was a reckless pilot or she wasn't one of the best pilots. And that very well may be. Her husband was a very good publicist. And so I think that speaks a lot to why she's the one we remember and not other women pilots. But I think I thought about this a lot, and she was very lucky in her flights, and I think that might have clouded her judgment or made her think things will work out. I mean, her solo flight across the Atlantic, so many things went wrong. Her altimeter failed, some welding split
mm,
on the engine. There was a huge storm that hadn't been predicted. So, and she made it through. She almost
mm.
didn't. I mean, she went into a dive and almost went into the ocean. Her wings iced. Uh, yeah, it was a terrible, terrible flight, but she survived. And there were other times when she made it through. And I mean, maybe she did get a little cocky, but I think she was human. You kind of want to believe the best of what's going to happen. And I think that's what happened with her.
Right. Yeah, I had no idea. I just, as an outsider, like many, have seen little pieces of information on her, studied her in school, that kind of thing. But I had
Hmm.
no idea that I thought she was an expert pilot and had studied flying all her life, and this was what it was. This was her passion, and obviously she enjoyed it, but like you said, she couldn't afford to keep up the flying, so she did other things, and like her path went one way and another, but then it came calling back to her. So in a way, it was almost like hers to do. This particular
Hmm.
story was her path. It's
Yeah.
very interesting, when if you believe in that kind of thing. I mean, because what were the chances, right, that she would be the one that they would approach to do this? That she would be the one that would survive some of these flights that you said were certainly very treacherous, and she survived them, and it all led to this last trip. And here
Yeah.
she is, remembered even to this day because of it. Fascinating. Yeah, it's just really an interesting story. Well, thank you for that insight. I'm going to have to grab a copy of the book now. I'm really intrigued. Yeah, for sure. Well, this is what I'm a very curious person, and this is what this kind of a story, or a kind of these individuals that things have happened to them and in their life, and then, like you said, we have no specific ending. And
Hmm.
that we're actually, this walks right into our next question about the birth of conspiracy thinking, because that's where
Mm.
my mind goes. Right, conspiracy theories and storytelling often grow when information is missing. And as we can tell, and I can feel it from you too, there's a lot of information missing. So, what were some of the key historical conditions that allowed speculation to transpire in this case with Amelia?
Well, I mean, some of it was, um, like I said, the paranoia about Japan, and then later the paranoia about the things that our U.S. government could do. I mean, if you think the Japanese theory got very popular in the 60s, and you think about, well, what else? I mean, the 60s was a very paranoid time. JFK is assassinated. There's so many people just start to think, oh, our government is doing things and we don't know what they're doing. And that really fed into this paranoia about Amelia Earhart. People thought, oh, there's files, top secret files that the government has that they're not releasing. They're not admitting that they had her killed. And I think part of it is people don't accept that things might be random or chance, that doesn't, that they want
Mm,
everything to be connected and make sense, because it makes you feel like you have more control over the world, or like the world is understandable. And I totally get that, because it's very unsettling to think, well, no, it's just because all these small things went wrong that this person died. Because then you think, oh, what's going wrong now that's going to affect me? Um, but yeah, I think that's one of the things. Lately, a lot of the searching has been underwater and been focusing on the theory that she ran out of gas. She got lost, ran out
mm,
of gas, and crashed. And that's really driven by technology. I mean, the technology for undersea searching has advanced incredibly. And I mean, it just wasn't possible when she disappeared. And we just know so little about the ocean. And so the idea that she would disappear into the ocean is almost like she disappeared into space. Like, how are we ever going to see what happened to her? But now there is the technology. And I mean, if that's what happened to her, and if there's somebody who wants to spend a lot of time and a lot of money, the plane could be found. I mean, there is the technology for it
mm,
now. So I think that's why we're hearing about it more now.
yes, that would make total sense. You're right, because they discovered the Titanic after many a
Yeah.
year, but unfortunately, hers is a smaller item, so it would take a lot more
Yeah.
time and a lot more money. And of course, yeah. But that is actually, you're right, the conspiracy theories. But that's how our minds go. We make things up all the
Hmm.
time. I read
Hmm.
something really
Hmm.
funny the other day. It says I get unsettled when my the voices in my head are quiet, and it said it's because I never know what those effers are up to, what they're planning. Oh my
Right,
God.
exactly.
And what I said, I'm worried what they might be planning, but oh my God, because it's
Right.
true. We make, we make our own reality. I mean, really, our thoughts are more
Hmm.
powerful than anything. That's what differentiates us from the animal kingdom, but that's what it leads to fascinating information and the mysteries that are behind this story.
Hmm.
So yeah, thank you for that. That just popped into my head because it's like, yeah, we're busy making things up all the time. And it's like,
Yeah, yeah,
we
that's
can
what we
and
do.
that's exactly what we do. So what was the most surprising or powerful moment that you experienced in the field? I'd love to get some insight into, you got on the boat, you found out you were seasick, and then you went off into this island. Give us a sense of what that was like. And maybe there was a
Oh, it
moment
was,
that powerful.
yeah. Well, there are two that I can think of. One is when we landed on the island. Now, the island, Nikumaroro, has a coral reef around it that a
Mm,
ship could totally crash against. In fact, there is a shipwreck there from 1929, and you can still see the remains of it. So our actual ship had to anchor off the island, and we would take these little boats through this canal that had been blasted a long time ago. And then we'd walk through a forest, basically a forest of
mm,
tropical trees with all these snow white birds that would hover in the air. And we would walk through there to the lagoon and then take another small boat to the site where they were looking for um, basically any remains. And just being in that forest, oh, it was so beautiful. It smelled so good. There was so much noise from all the birds, just so many birds. And then these crabs about the size of dinner plates would be standing there, kind of doing their little, trying to threaten us. So it was just so beautiful. And then
yeah.
at the site, now, this is the site where this group called the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery has been many times. They've done archaeological digs there.
Mm,
The expedition I was on brought human remains sniffing dogs to the site to see if they could locate any bones. And these are dogs, they smell. They're not like the kind of dogs that you'd use to look for a recent murder victim. They only smell bones or
mhm,
signs of decay.
mm,
So these four very sweet dogs were brought to this site, and each one would sniff around, and then they'd sit up straight with their ears forward and look at their trainer, and they would alert, which means that they did smell human
mm,
remains, which was so, it was really exciting to see that happen. But then it was also exciting to see the archaeologists who had been working on this project for so long just be thrilled. They thought, oh, we're going to find her. The trouble was that where the dog sniffed does not necessarily mean that there were bones right there, because they were sniffing the scent. They were locating the scent. And that could travel along tree roots or crab burrows and be,
mm,
feet away. So we did all sorts of digging. Well, I didn't dig, but they all did all sorts of digging afterwards. And they never found any bones, partly
mm,
because the island is a coral island and coral looks very much like bone. So it was sort of
mm.
a highlight and then a disappointment, but it was still pretty exciting to see the dogs at work.
Yeah, I had no idea there were dogs that just smell bones, but why would they
Mhm.
mistake coral for bones? Does coral
Well, they
smell like
didn't
bones?
mistake. No, they didn't mistake it. What the trouble was, when the humans were then digging,
Mm,
when you get a little bit of whitish matter, it could be
mhm,
either coral or a bone, and it turned out mostly to be coral rubble. So somewhere there was probably the remains of someone, some castaway, whether it was
Mm,
Earhart or her navigator, Fred Noonan, um, we still don't know.
right. Yeah, well, yeah, the mystery continues. I did read about the
Mhm.
crabs actually, because I was reading an excerpt from your book. And that
Mm.
they're like dead. They call, I don't know what they call them, monster crabs or deadly crabs. I said these can't be real. They were saying how they're
I
so
know.
big they could eat a human or something, and I was like
Well, I don't know about
fascinated.
that.
And so
Yeah,
I looked them up and they said, yeah, they're very large, but like you said, they're the size of a dinner plate. I mean, wow,
yeah,
on these
yeah,
remote islands or remote places in the world, the creatures grow much bigger. It's very interesting.
yeah. I mean, there are some fake photos out there about these crabs where they're the size of a garbage can, but I don't know.
Yeah.
That's not
No, they
true. But,
didn't.
and it's not that, yeah, it's not that they would kill a person necessarily, but they're scavengers. And
Right.
so that's the idea that maybe they had
Yeah.
scavenged whoever the
Yeah.
castaway was. But yeah, they're very large. Actually, they weren't the ones that scared me so much or bothered me. I wasn't scared. There were lots of strawberry hermit crabs, which are, just about this
Mm-hmm.
this big, but there's so many of them, and they would all kind of move in a group, and that
Mm.
I thought was a little bit more troubling.
Oh my Lord. Yeah. It's like, here they come. Let's go. There's a group of
I
them
know.
chasing
Don't
you.
sit down.
It sounds
Yeah.
like Raiders of the Lost Ark with all the snakes. It's like, crabs.
Right.
Yeah. Oh my Lord.
Yes,
That
a
is, but
sequel.
what a story to tell though. That's so interesting. Yeah, I could, yeah, and they make that
Mm.
noise and it's like, yeah, okay. I'd be like you. I'd be on the run. I'm out of here.
Right.
Head for the shore.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well,
Right.
thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It's fascinating. It's this is the well, that being said, of course, our culture is fixated on her death more than her life. And like you said, you gave us some insight into, she this wasn't really how she started. So why do you think that is? That we're more fascinated with possibly, her death than how she actually lived.
Um, well, I think partly because there's something people keep popping up and saying that they found her. So there's a newness
Mm,
to her death. It's still being investigated. Um, and it's interesting. I think sometimes it splits down, maybe not gender, but a little bit gender, where, it's more men who are looking for her and more women who are focused on her life. Um,
mm,
there are, and one of the reasons I did the book the way I did, that's biography and looking at the searches, is I just wanted to make sure that we weren't forgetting who the person was that
right.
is being searched for. Um, the other thing I always think about with her is she just feels so modern. Earhart feels
Mm,
so modern, and I feel like we could plop her down in 2026 and she would just be so curious and fascinated by everything that was going on, and get up to speed right away, and
right.
have her electric car, and be on the move. So I think that's part of it too. She doesn't feel so much from the past as others might.
Mm. Well, you walked right into our question. Is that that's
Oh.
possibly why she resonates more with our modern audience? In other words,
Mm-hmm.
especially with women leaders, because of who she was and her life. Like you said, that she would probably be plopped into our world today and just take it by the horns and go for it. I mean, who knows? She'd probably be on
Hmm.
that spaceship to Mars when they get it ready,
Right.
for
Probably.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the adventure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's she
Hmm.
obviously had that in her blood for sure, because for someone
Yeah.
to take that project on, it's interesting that she was approached to do that. Very interesting. Well, legacy in the face of uncertainty. You make the argument that the mystery doesn't weaken her legacy. but it amplifies it. Why do you hope today a visionary leaders take away from the fact that the story remains unfinished? Or what do you hope
Well,
that people take? Mhm.
um, I think one thing that to take away from her and from Earhart and her story is that she did what she wanted to do, and we still remember her for it. I mean, she would
Mm,
often say, somebody would say, "Why are you making this risky flight?" And she would say, "Because I want to, or for the fun of it." And I mean, that's kind of a flippant answer, but it's also a way of saying, I don't have to explain myself. I'm just going to do
mm,
it. I don't need to justify myself. I'm just going to do what I'm drawn to do. And I think that that is something that people still struggle with, and women especially still struggle with, not having to justify their actions,
mm,
whether it's taking a big job or traveling around the world by yourself, whatever it might be.
mm. Or like getting on a ship and going to explore Amelia Earhart's death.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
But I love that. I love what you said. That's so empowering. It's just you're doing it
Mhm.
because you want to do it. It's
Mhm.
something that you feel it's your calling, and it's something that you don't have to explain why, and maybe you can't explain why. It's just something you feel that you need to do, your intuition. And
Mhm.
there's definitely a lot of that with women, especially. So here's a question for you, Rachel. When after standing on the island yourself, did your personal instinct about what happened to Amelia shift even slightly?
I suppose it did. I started to think about how awful it would have been to be
Mm,
her if that is indeed what happened to her. Um, to feel you're on this island, it's very lush, but there's actually not that much food, or you don't know how to get the food. Um, all the things that you've done and all the dangers that you've gone through all of a sudden have come home to roost, so to speak. And, eventually realizing that it's the end. Um, I did think about that a lot. Later on, I started to wonder, because at first I really was convinced of this theory, the castaway theory, just because of all the evidence they'd collected around the campfire. But then I started to wonder if that's truly what happened. But yeah, I did. It gave me a sense of putting myself in her position
mm,
and what it would have been like to have been in that loud plane and know you were running out of gas, or to have been on that island, or even to have been, landing on an island where you don't speak the language and people are acting aggressively towards you. It just, whatever happened, it was scary.
mhm,
And, at some point she must have known it was the end. And so that's what I do think about.
mm. Yeah, that I could see that happening because you embody the story. You embody the life, and
Hmm.
especially because you're immersed in the research and immersed in the the going to see the island and so on and so forth. And so I have a
Hmm.
question then. Is this on National Geographic? This story, was it all filmed? This expedition?
They're not the first expedition, but the second expedition I went on, which was focusing on searching the water around Nikumaroro. And that was actually, you'd mentioned the Titanic earlier. The second expedition was led by Bob Ballard, who's the one who did
Mm.
find the Titanic. So that expedition was filmed. And oh shoot, I'm blanking out on what the name of it is, but you can find it still on the Disney owns National Geographic, so you can see it on Disney Plus. And
Okay,
you can see my
wonderful.
shirt for like 5 seconds.
Ah, hey, Uncle, I know that person.
Right.
Well, if there was one word that best describes Amelia Earhart, what would it be?
um, brave, brave.
Mm,
Yeah. She,
yeah.
um, she did things that, and I think she had a higher tolerance for danger than a lot of people, but she also was willing to put herself out there as a different type of woman, a woman who was not doing what was expected of most women in the 20s and 30s, and also to advocate that other women could follow what they wanted to
Hmm.
do, whether it was being a
Right.
pilot or doing something else entirely.
Mm. Yes, I could see that. Absolutely. Well, if there was one message that you can share with every trailblazing woman, what would it be?
I think it would be to do things the way she did them because you want to for the fun of it, and not worry about having to give reasons for what you're doing. Just if you feel pulled to do it, just do it, and that will take you down that trail and help you blaze
Hmm.
that trail.
Right. Trust your intuition. Yeah,
Yeah.
def-
Yeah.
definitely. Well, give us our audience an idea of where they can connect with you, Rachel, and purchase your book.
Well, you can go to my website, which is rachelhartiganauthor.com. And book is also available at your local bookstore, Amazon, Bookshop, Barnes and Noble, all those places.
Okay, wonderful. And because we're here on the Epic Vision Zone, I have one last question. If your life were an epic story, what would the title
Mm,
be?
oh boy. uh, well, when Charles Lindbergh had been the first one to fly across the Atlantic solo, and the people who followed after him, including or who wanted to follow him, including Amelia Earhart, they were talked about as following the Lindbergh Trail. So
Mm.
maybe mine would be following the Earhart Trail.
Mm, I like that. Perfect. Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Rachel, for reminding us that the unsolved stories are often the ones that keep us human and reaching and questioning and exploring beyond the known horizons. Once again, for information and to connect with Rachel, go to the Epic Vision Zone bio pages where you will find all of her social media and direct contact information. And if today's conversation sparked your curiosity, be sure to follow, share, and tag someone who loves a great historical mystery and go out and get the book. Follow me on Instagram at Jane Applegath. Look me up at janeapplegath.com and like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Epic Vision Zone. Sending you much love and gratitude. Until next time, stay visionary, lead with love, stay epic.